Welcome back, pop culture nerds. Today, we are joined once again by the individual who helped us kick off Season 2. He is a very talented actor and musician who is the star of Assassin's Creed 3 and will be reprising the role of Connor Kenway in the upcoming Assassin's Creed Nexus. Welcome back to the podcast, Noah Watts.
Noah.
Hello, thank you.
Yeah. Now, I gotta say, Joe did not add all of the celebrations and hand clapping in post last time, but if you want,
we'll go
the
bigger
hand
this
claps,
time.
Yeah, we can go bigger.
Some whistles, and maybe that Star Wars guy that dies. Oh! You know that yell that always is in every Star Wars movie. I think it's in every Indiana Jones movie too.
Is that the Wilhelm? Is that what that is?
Yeah, it's the scream that you can hear it every. Yeah. Yeah.
You know what? I think we have to use it now. We might as well.
Yeah.
But, dude, Noah, it is fantastic to see you again, and curious to know, because obviously we're here to talk about a very popular film by the name of Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. But catching up with you here, interested to hear how things have been going for you, because the last time I connected with you, like over your streaming when you're doing Twitch and everything, you were like knee deep in making some new music. So how is that process going for you, and can we expect to hear anything?
Yeah, I've been working on some remasters of some old songs and then some new songs, and I'm going to re-release the remasters and the new songs together in a 13-song album. I've just gotten all of it finished recording and mastered, and now I'm getting into the publishing of it and the legal stuff about getting your work copywritten and the ownership behind it, and then I also have some other singles that I'm going to release as well that I've been working on, and I'm trying to get a video together as well. But it's just been so long to get all the right parts together, to get the music together. Recording is a really long process for me, and I'm working with a studio in Vegas, so I'm having to travel down there and send different takes from the stuff that I can do in my studio, and send them down to the engineer down there. So it's just been a long process this past year and a half or so of trial and error. I tried to do 3 songs and they didn't come out the way I wanted in the studio, so I had to go to another studio. But I just want them to be how I'm hearing them in my head. So with music, I don't want to just put it out there as quickly as possible. I want it to be something that I'm really proud of, and that is finished in a sense. So that's pretty much most of the music. I've been playing some shows. I did an event for a nonprofit organization that is called Elk River Exchange, which is it brings clothing to families on the Crow Reservation, the Cheyenne Reservation, who might not have a lot of money or resources to get good winter clothing, and just all sorts of other stuff. It's kind of like a Goodwill that travels to the reservation and sets up a booth in a tent, and basically it's pay what you can. And so I hooked up with a musician, a Crow Apsalaga musician, and a Crow fashion designer, and myself. We did a showcase for Native talent in Montana, and raised money for this nonprofit organization. And I played a show as well. So I'm doing those type of shows. I'm not trying to do bars on the weekend or playing every week or something. I'm more interested in creating an event and doing something that gives back to community, or people that need, or to show talent from other Native artists.
very cool.
I think there has to be something to be said for doing something that has so much meaning behind it, as opposed to, like you said, just putting the music out there to expose yourself to an audience in the performing terms, not anything weird, and
Yeah.
making it so that you can get your music out there, and you're doing it in a way that it just has a much greater and much better impact. So that is just phenomenal and awesome that you are doing what you're doing.
Yeah. That's what I'm trying. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, if you are exposing yourselves to audiences, though, that might just be the new experience, and you're trying something new. Like, I can't fault you for that.
Well,
So-
I haven't got my OnlyFans set up yet, so I don't know if I ever will.
Well,
Hey,
we will definitely keep our eyes like everything posted to your socials, just in case something slips.
Yeah.
Oh man, that's great. That's hilarious, man. Well, that's awesome. It's awesome. Really happy to hear about that, and also really happy to come together for what's a little bit different for us, because normally we like to do a conversation. We talk about someone's origins, but oddly enough, we're talking about a different origin this time, which is that of character Indiana Jones. And I'm just going to put it this way. We've never done this before, Noah. We're happy you're here to help us with it. And I guess overall, we can take turns on this one, and we can start with Noah. But Noah, what was your first exposure to The Last Crusade? Did you see it in theaters? Like, what was the first showing like for you?
Okay. My first introduction to Indiana was Temple of Doom. I went to the video store of my dad. It was called Tape King. We had VHS back then.
Nice.
These tapes, they're like black. You put them in a VCR. And it's like old school stuff, man. And my dad took me there. I think I must have been 7, 8, somewhere like that. And he got me Temple of Doom. He told me I was looking at Transformers, or I was looking at cartoons or something. My dad was like, "Hey, you got to try this one out. I swear you're going to love it." And I kicked and screamed the whole way. I don't want to watch this. I don't want to watch this. It's going to be good for you. Trust me, you're going to love it. Brought it home, instantly loved it. Had to watch all 3 of them immediately after.
Mm-hmm.
So I went and I asked him to buy me the whole trilogy on VHS so I could just watch it over and over and over again. And that was also one of my first introductions. When I first saw Last Crusade, it was around the same time, of that same age. And it was Sean Connery's impact on me in that movie really stood out in comparison to the other 2. The chemistry between Harrison Ford and Sean Connery was so great. And it kind of reminded me of me and my dad sometimes. Gave me those vibes and those feels. And I just really remember thinking how cool Harrison Ford is and how cool Indiana Jones was when I was just a little guy.
Mm-hmm.
And I watched that over. It was one of the few tapes I had. I watched it over and over and over again, memorized lines and stuff. So yeah, I was a little guy. Must have been 7 or something like that. What about you guys?
Yeah, Joe, go ahead.
Yeah, it's kind of the same deal. I don't think that I saw it through a rental. I'm pretty sure the first time I saw this movie, it was actually like network TV. So, it's like shortened up and made to fit like a time slot, and commercials always like, get in the way of the best part of everything. But that is how my relationship started with this movie. And the only way I got to see this was when I had to go and visit like my grandmother, because I didn't have cable when this movie came out, or when I was growing up for a good chunk. So like I had to watch it on a weekend, and kind of the same deal. Like this movie just has so many elements of good storytelling and scenes that just kind of draw everyone in and are just incredibly memorable. And kind of like what Noah said, like there is a element that I think a lot of people will see in relationship with they have with their father, what Indy has here. And that like I feel like my dad had this kind of loving distance with me growing up, and that he loved me, he supported me, had no idea how I operated, and was vastly different the way he did things, because he was all about you have to work to make a living, and if you're not doing that, then you can't live. And I'm like, oh no, I think you have to have fun every once in a while, Dad. And he's like, I did that once. It was awful. I'm gonna go weld something. So that dynamic of like how much Dr. Jones is just like in for the grail is like my dad with welding. So it just kind of really rung home with me. How about you, Mark?
Well, before we talk about me, I feel like your dad, he taught you the art of self-reliance, Joe. That's really what he was doing.
Yes. Like my dad would do great in any sort of apocalypse because he can just make anything.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, my experience is also very similar, except my dad at the time, he dropped the money to buy the 3-pack VHS set that had them all. So when people walked into the house and they saw that, they're like, you're either rich or you've got like a 10-inch dong, because I don't know how you can afford that right now. But either way, we had that 3-pack and we watched the hell out of it, but we routinely came back to Last Crusade. Last Crusade was the one that always went in. And then we actually, when we moved from Arizona, when my dad was in the military, that VHS box set got lost.
Oh, no.
So, yeah, my dad, he's like looking around for this. And he's like, where is the Indiana Jones box set? Where is it? Can't find it. He goes to the store. They only have Last Crusade. So he buys the Last Crusade, brings it home, and we watched that VHS tape on repeat for, it felt like 10 years.
Yeah.
See, I thought you were going to say that it was just, one day your dad is on a ship in the middle of a storm and he's getting punched by some other guy who has the trilogy right there. He said, this is the second time I've had to get my property from you, Mr. Benke.
Yeah. It belongs in my VCR.
It's funny to say it this way, but in a lot of ways, my dad was Indiana Jones to me because he was a huge history buff. And with the military, he got to travel overseas. So he got to go to Jerusalem. He got to see some of these holy sites. And for us, this history lesson went beyond the movie, right? And so there's some real things that have happened in the movie that they kind of weave in and out, which is, obviously something we'll get to. But yeah, that's what really made this almost like a lifelong pursuit for us, was we love the history, love the movie. And Noah, to your point, that dad-son dynamic, we do feel very similar balance in our family with it.
Well, yeah, my dad wanted to be like Indiana Jones, I think, a little bit, because he was a college professor at the time. He was an English professor. In a way, Sean Connery's character kind of sometimes reminded me of my grandpa, his dad, my dad's dad, their relationship. And because they were kind of distant, but then sometimes it would be I was Indiana and my dad was Sean Connery. It would go in and out, and it kind of was that dynamic between a father and son. And I could see the same dynamic between my dad and his dad, and I could also see the similarities between me and my dad. But I know he fancied himself as Indiana in a way, because college professor kind of thing, and he's having the secret life of being an adventurer and a, archaeologist.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was, so were his female students also like just staring him down while he's teaching? I mean, how close did we get to the mark on this?
Well, was he a boy band level of admiration from his students?
He was a handsome man. He did. I do remember some of his students coming up to me years later and telling me that they loved having my dad as a teacher. What a nice guy he was, and also how handsome he is. But not quite as handsome as me, always.
Of course.
So of course. No, that can't. That can't be replicated.
I was just about to say, there's this can't be my dad. I'm prettier than this man.
Yes. Like, a lot of people say, "Oh, you look like your dad." I was like, "Well, I'm a handsomer version of that guy. I do look like him, kind of."
Well, one thing we've been doing this year on the show, Noah, is we tend to go into the ratings and what people are saying about these films that we review. This one, we didn't feel it was necessary because there's so much adoration for it. the Rotten Tomatoes, the fans, they're all high marks. We're talking 80s and above. So we didn't think that was really all that necessary.
Yeah.
So instead, we really just wanted to dive in and focus on some of the, the thematic elements. But one thing I wanted to ask you about was literally the opening of this movie, because we're taken back to, early 1900s Utah.
Yeah.
And right away, it's all about
River.
scenery. Yeah.
River Phoenix, right? And it's like Monument Valley, was it, or what?
Yeah.
Where was it? Utah, did you say?
Yeah.
Utah. Yeah, I really, okay, so do you remember, I don't know, in one of the original VHS tapes, and the one I had, there was a whole trailer for Young Indiana Jones, and like it was a show that they were releasing upcoming or something. Do you remember that?
Yeah, with Sean Patrick Flannery.
Yeah, and he got with Pancho Villa or something. I never watched it. I never got a hold of it. I know where you could find it. But yes, I didn't. I thought that River did a much more. He looked much more interesting, and his acting was much more compelling than that Young Indiana Jones or whatever they were doing. I thought that beginning part with him was just great, phenomenal. I loved all of the circus train fight and chase. I mean, just all of the little, I don't know, the good cinematography, the little jokes where, the horse, he gets to go jump off and try to land on the horse, and the horse moves forward a little bit. There's all these little tiny things. The guy who's with him, who's not really in good shape, trying to crawl through. I mean, there's just little tiny jokes and great dialogue throughout it. And it's very memorable. You got the horses being chased down by the early 1900s cars. Just like a great, Indiana Jones. Starts off right away with a nice bang and gets you sucked in immediately,
Yeah. And I appreciate like the subtle misdirection they do in the beginning when you get brought in with this like Boy Scout troop, you're not sure what's going on. You go into a dig and you see the guy with the leather coat and the fedora. You're like, there's Indy.
There's Indy, right? No.
Indy is one of the Boy Scouts. Like it was just a fun way to start the movie and keep the audience guessing that even though this is like the third film in the series, it's not going to entirely be the exact same thing.
And it gives you, when he finally gets back to his house, and the man with the leather jacket comes in and says, "You lost today, kid. But that doesn't mean you have to like it."
Oh, God.
And then he gives him that hat. And then you're like, oh, so that's why he wears the hat, And we didn't know that in Raiders or Temple of Doom. We had no idea why he dresses like that. But then that's just at the beginning of Last Crusade. Oh, so now we got history on Indiana and some of the backstory between him and his father, how he grew up, what made him like this, and who he is. And it was a great moment, definitely.
It is kind of a change up, like Joe mentioned, that as a kid, when I watched this movie, I was just excited because there's some high flying theatrics. There's, it's as big as 1912 Utah could be, right? And it was that interesting to suck you in. But then as you get older, you're like going, oh my God, this is a perfect way to bookend a trilogy, because you're learning all these things that nobody was ever even trying to answer in the first two films.
Yeah.
And I think part of this, though, as you've kind of called out, Noah, is the mysticism of Henry Jones Sr., because we've never even had a chance to think about Indy's dad in the first two movies.
No.
I mean, no mentions of him whatsoever. So I don't know. It's the concept of like, he's in this room that's just dark enough to let the rays of sunshine kind of poke through. You don't see his face right away.
Just his hand.
And just his hand. Yeah.
Just his hand, right? Drawing on something.
Yeah. Oh, and just you learn so much with one line of dialogue, which is, "No, Dad, you listen to me." And he goes, "Junior." Right away. I'm like, oh my God.
Yep.
The manners that Indy had to learn. Oh my God, this is fantastic.
Count to 20. 1, 2, 3 in Greek.
Yeah.
Oh,
just brilliant. Ah, yeah. So that's the stuff I tend to look for. It's like, yeah, there's a lot of great stuff, but when you actually pause it and just kind of look at it, I mean, it's incredible that for a movie that's, I wouldn't say it was outside the realm of like blockbusters, but Indiana Jones has its own feel that I think a lot of Hollywood doesn't usually subscribe to, which is that swashbuckling, that callback to media that was popular when George Lucas was a child, like in the 30s and 40s.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
By the time these movies are coming out, it is a drastically different landscape. We're getting into more sci-fi oriented types of films. So
super action stars, Jean-Claude Van Damme,
yeah.
Arnold Schwarzenegger, Sylvester Stallone, Rambo, those were the action movies. When did Crusade come out? Was it 90s, early 90s or late 80s?
Okay. I thought it was like 89, wasn't it?
Pretty sure it's 89, yeah.
89, yeah. So I see, I mean, I hear what you're saying there. It's not your typical action movie of the time. It's got more dialogue. It's got more, I think, substance to it. And the lead character is, a professor. So we got to have, it can't just be just shoot him up and, show the muscles. It's got to, but I think Harrison Ford had already kind of solidified himself as somebody that could carry a movie and be that type of character. You look at Han Solo and you look at Deckard from Blade Runner, and you see he's not your typical good-looking, pretty, lead actor. He's got kind of some, I don't know, swagger, and he's mysterious. He's you don't know if you really like everything about him so much, and especially like in Blade Runner or in Han Solo at the beginning when he was kind of a jerk, Hey kid, I gotta get paid, like he has that something about Harrison Ford, something about his acting and who he is just, you just want to watch him and everything he does.
Yeah,
and
just don't
these
say
movies were
looking.
these were his best, I heard George offered this to Spielberg, this trilogy to him after he had made Star Wars. Spielberg was asking some help or something for, you got anything that I can do? And George was like, here you go. Here, I got one for you. And not only I got one, I got three. Get ready for this. I can't remember. I heard that. I think it was in some Disney Star Wars documentary or something. But
I'm pretty sure they went on vacation. It might have been Hawaii. Like they're in the same location and they're on the beach, and this conversation you just mentioned happens. They're just kind of talking through something, and then the idea of Indiana Jones gets floated across at a time when George Lucas has just dropped one of the biggest movies of that time. So I think you're dead on. I think your history is on point. I think
it was like a perfect storm,
So, which is what I think some of the other Indiana Jones were, to use that term. They were a perfect storm, whereas this film actually takes on a couple different things. We've already talked about how we have this stamp in the beginning of like young America, right? Like just out of the Wild West. But then it kind of shifts into this more modern tale as we kind of open up into a mystery of sorts. Like Henry Jones Sr., he's gone missing, right? And suddenly we're trying to figure out, okay, what's happened here? So what was your thought, Noah, on the film taking that turn as more of an investigative movie compared to, Raiders or Temple of Doom?
It was it's action on Raiders to me. The beginning, let's see, and Temple of Doom was it's kind of a lot of spirits and weird the whole voodoo, or not voodoo. It was like this weird cult, and this guy's ripping hearts out, and
Mm-hmm.
this was more kind of with the addition of Sean Connery, it was definitely, like you say, more of a mystery type of a feel, more of a detective almost kind of thing, spy thriller. You know, he's got the German Austrian woman who, you know, you don't know if you trust her. You kind of like the whole thing. You're working through it from from his eyes. I got to go find Dad. I don't know where he is. I liked it, and I'm glad they went back to Nazis and you know, like Raiders. I'm glad they returned to, you know, because that's what reminds me, you know, of Indiana Jones most, is him fighting Nazis or Russians. But I just like that time period a lot. I don't know what it is about that. It reminds me of my grandpa. He was in World War II. He was a colonel in the Air Force, and he was over there in Europe, and it just kind of makes me feel nostalgic for all that. And I was completely happy with the boat chase and with all of the Venice stuff. It just it has to be my favorite in the series, even though Raiders of the Lost Ark is great as well. It's hard to choose, you know. I do know I like those two better than Temple of Doom.
Yeah.
And I think it has a lot to do. I like Karen Allen as well in Raiders. She's great. So.
To your point, Noah, what I kind of think of with the first and the third movie in this series with Indiana Jones, he's basically like Dikembe Mutombo to the Nazis at this point. He points the finger at them and he's like, no, not gonna happen.
No. And you don't get this artifact.
No. And then he runs off. You know, it's that's that vibe that you're getting here. But then when before you really know that the Nazis are behind it, though, like Indy is just showing this almost like Ray Stan Aykroyd kind of enthusiasm for what he's doing.
Yeah,
like the investigations, finding all these things under Venice, and it really allows you to see a side of Indy that we don't even really know, because I feel like at times that he is not always a full believer, right? And he's kind of finding himself. He's finding himself in this movie, despite it being the third one.
Well, it's kind of like how they I feel like they kind of ground it very well when Indy is, you know, teaching that class, and he says that archaeology is about fact, not finding the truth, and that like most of the discovery is done in a lab or in a building or in a library, and it's not out there in a lost temple, or, you know, X never marks the spot. It's like you said, it's removing some of the overly grandiose elements of the series and letting you know that this is going to be a slightly more grounded detective story that we'll be getting here as Indy's hunting for some sort of truth, or hunting for, in this case, trying to find his dad again.
Yeah, just his dad. He's not really looking for the Grail. Just trying to find my dad. You know, I remember him kept saying that. My father. I'm trying looking for my father. I
love the breadcrumb effect of that.
I like the comedy on its set when it comments back on itself when he finds the X on the floor after he'd already said X never marks the spot, and then it does actually mark the spot. Well, X marks the spot. No, it's just a little joke upon itself, you know, on him, and the movie's got all sorts of that throughout it, kind of commenting on itself a little bit sometimes. But yeah, it was a detective story, and he wasn't really looking for the Grail at the beginning. He was just trying to find his father, and like you said, he gets sucked into it and starts to see, holy, these clues are making sense. They're leading me to this. Then these guys show up and they're trying to chase me in these boats. You know, it just starts unraveling out of control.
Yeah, I think that's a perfect way to describe like what happens here. And I think as we do progress through the movie, I think one of the best parts of it has been something that we've all alluded to, and this is like relationships with our own father and what we see in this movie, because you just really see how their relationship, how kind of strained and yet supportive it is the whole time. Even at parts where you've got like Indy wanting to be at his father's throat, he's still calling him sir. He's calming himself down because he knows that I'm not supposed to talk to my dad this way. And I think that relationship and things that happen to these two in the movie really defines kind of how this goes. So I'm kind of interested to hear, like, what do we think is like a pivotal or kind of a paramount moment that these two experience in this movie together?
I think the very begin. Okay, so the very beginning, when they meet while he's trying to break into the castle, he comes in, he breaks in through the other window with his whip, and crashes through the window, and right away, boom! Sean Connery hits him over the head with a vase, and Junior. It is you, Junior. And what are you doing here? and then you get this, depression from Sean Connery about breaking that vase. And then he looks at it and goes, "Is it my head?" He goes, "My head." He goes, "Oh, I'm okay, Dad. Thank God." And Indy thinks he's talking about him, like, thank God you're okay. No, it's fake.
Yes.
He's more concerned about breaking this vase that could be a really great, artifact or like collector's item. He doesn't care about hitting him over the head at all. It's not even in his mind.
Yeah.
and that just shows you how Sean Connery's character is, Jones Sr. is obsessed. He's obsessed with, all these relics and all these things. And he's not very good at family. He's not good at showing love. And, that's just not who he is. And that right there gives you a real sharp look at their relationship, even though they haven't seen each other in so many years. It's just right back to it. He's fucking 12 again, Excuse me.
No, you're fine. We have that.
Let it fly.
We have that little explicit rating on the side, so you feel free to use whatever you want. And if it's really bad, we'll bleep it out. But
okay.
but I love that you mentioned that, because they are kind of estranged for the reasons that you mentioned. And I mean, I've met people that behave like Henry Jones, where they are so obsessed with details, they are so obsessed with a topic of some kind that they almost appear non-human. And some of them don't grow out of that. And as you can clearly see, the obsession that Henry Jones Sr. had right when his wife died, Indy's mom, she dies just before the events of the Cross Coronado. So to see him just go deeper and deeper into what he thinks is discovery at that point, it is funny to see that he's still that same guy that we barely met at the beginning of the movie. And we crack up every time that scene happens. It's really a testament, I think, to how Sean Connery was not known for his improv or his comedic abilities. And he brought it to this movie, editing the script and helping direct them on what sounds more organic here. What should we try to insert? And
I should have mailed it to the Marx Brothers. You didn't bring it, did you? You did. I should have mailed it to the Marx Brothers. Well, who's going to cut the safe? Yeah, Junior. I told you. And just the banter.
Oh, my God.
And then right after the scene, they're getting tied up. I mean, every scene has this great moment. I mean, there isn't between them. It's just every scene is on. The fire. He sets the carpet on fire. He doesn't want to tell them. You shouldn't blow it out, and then the floor's on fire. Let me tell you something. What?
I'm the chair.
I'm the chair.
His Scottish does poke out a little bit, by the way, when he has to raise his voice, and I think it's fantastic. And to the point of what you just mentioned, this is something that in the years following people talked about a lot. It wasn't so much in the moment. But Harrison Ford would go on to mention just how relaxed this set felt and how naturally him and Sean Connery got along.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, there are people who have talked about having a hard time working with Sean Connery, and Andy Garcia mentioned this when he was working on The Untouchables with him. There is a scene where he just wasn't quite getting his placement right when he was answering a phone.
His blocking.
Yeah. His blocking, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And Sean Connery yelled out at him. He goes, "It's not that hard, boy. It's not Hamlet." and it's stuff like that it makes me wonder if maybe he was a little bit more tempered at this point. Like maybe this was a natural progression of him as he got closer to retirement. I mean, he was getting to that point here.
Well, maybe I think the key is that you just have to sit down in a blimp with your pants off next to Sean Connery, and it just gets way easier, because this is a part that like is not always talked about in this movie. Is that I think in that scene it was so hot that Sean Connery and Harrison Ford were sitting with their pants off, and you didn't have to see that. But part of like what we talked about is like that banter, and the magic of that scene is they're talking about how they found it they both like at least like either that they both slept with Elsa at some point in time in their experience with her. And he's like, "Dad, how could you do that?" She's like, "You could be your grandfather." And he's like, "I'm just as human as the next man. I was the next man." And just it's just fantastic.
How'd you know she was a Nazi? How did you know she was a Nazi? She talks in her sleep. I didn't trust her. Why did you?
Which, hey, as we're talking about trivia, that is an ad-lib line from Sean Connery. They didn't write that one. And when he said that on set, everybody held it together as best they could. They stopped recording, and everyone just busts out laughing. It's like, how did you just like? It makes me wish I could just had a beer with Sean Connery just to hear what comes out of him.
Yeah,
because that's legendary, that line, and and I love how it also kind of plays into the fact that he was James Bond at one point.
Yeah,
and so the swagger carries over from that character. To this
who
one.
else could be Indiana Jones's dad but James Bond? You know, that's perfect. I mean, not literally, but I mean, some actor who's done that. It's a similar kind of. Indiana Jones kind of reminds me of that a little bit, you know, kind of an action hero, but also really intelligent and not just a hunk, more than that. And those two fit together. The casting on that was perfect. It was a perfect chemistry and mix. And I think maybe that's also another reason that Sean Connery didn't have such a hard time with Harrison Ford is, you know, he respected Harrison Ford probably, and Harrison Ford was probably showing up, hitting his marks, and doing his job. And when you do that with on set with another actor or with a group, you respect those actors more. When you show up on set and somebody's not hitting their marks and they're not saying their lines right and they didn't do their homework, it slows everybody down, and you start to get really annoyed with them because, you know, this is 10 takes now and you can't hit your mark, and this guy's getting upset over here, and then everybody's getting frustrated, and it's just something that just happens. If you are in that caliber of a profession, you expect that from whoever you're working with to show up and do their stuff, and you want to also show up and have everything together and also do stuff that inspires the other actor, that makes you want to show up and have something to get to add to the pot, to add to the soup. It is much more fun to work with people like that than to work with people who you're constantly waiting for. They're late, they're not hitting their lines. You have to grab their hand and bring them and pull them through this scene and help them get there. It's a lot more work. And if that's taken out of it, you start to have fun with each other. And it's rarer to find actors that you vibe with like that. Most of the time, you have to push and fake it. And I think maybe just those two got along great, and there wasn't much acting there. It was just their chemistry.
Yeah, just game respecting game at that point, I think. You know, one thing as we talk about this blimp scene, though, obviously Joe mentioned they weren't wearing pants because it's a very hot set, and apparently Sean Connery was a habitual sweater, kind of like me. I get warm literally in a freezer, but when we finally do get a chance to slow things down a little bit, because The Last Crusade is a movie that's incredibly well paced. You don't get too much of anything at the same time. And on the Zeppelin, on the blimp, when they're traveling, you do finally get a chance for these two characters to kind of reconcile, actually have some meaningful dialogue beyond, action scenes.
That is the turning point. Yeah. What you were talking about, what you were saying, a poignant moment between them when he finally tells him, you weren't there for me, and he gave him that whole speech, and I just love it. Sean Connery goes, "Well, I'm here now. Fine. What do you want to talk about?" And then Indiana's, "Well, I can't think of anything." "Well, then what are you complaining about?" It's just, it's that I taught you self-reliance, all that was, here's my side of the story. Here's my side of the story. And I think if any moment is the moment that they kind of go through that reconciling or kind of airing their grievances, that's one of them. That's one of the first ones where they finally trying to open up to each other across from that table. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but
oh no, you're good. You're good. I think it's like a natural progression, because even as they're leaving the castle and they're kind of squabbling a little bit, you still see some of the old dynamic where Indy is blasphemous for a moment.
Yeah, and he slaps him.
Literally gets smacked. He literally gets smacked. But these moments are really interesting in this movie because they also disclose how the mom was also not really understanding of this lifelong pursuit. And you finally get to see why Henry is the way he is, because she did believe in the pursuit, obviously not nearly as hard as he did. But I really love this sense of humanity these characters get to have, because unfortunately in action movies, that's not the thing we care about typically. we get half-assed romance stories. We're walking away from explosions, and as you mentioned, there's usually some pectorals and biceps being shown, and that's what makes this really, really rare, is that sense of story and development.
Yeah, and on that note of pectorals and biceps, I'd like to point out how weird it is that is how they say goodbye in Austria, because if Arnold would have done what Elsa did right before he said, "And I'll be back," completely changes every movie.
Oh, snap.
Wait, with a kiss or getting hit in the face by a baton?
I mean, a bit of both.
Well, that was the German.
A bit of both.
Okay.
Just Arnold slips you the tongue, says, "I'll be back," and then whack. Yeah. Like, oh, hey. So many mixed signals right now.
Yeah.
I don't know what to be.
Well, I did have a little bit of a crush on that Elsa. Before she was a Nazi. After the whole Nazi
she's
thing.
just a simple Fräulein. Yeah.
It's rare for people to start liking her after they find out, so that's good. Yeah. That's what we want.
Well, and then the next moment between them was, "You're gonna have to get the machine gun ready, Dad. You're gonna have to." And he's back there shooting. 11 o'clock. What happens at 11 o'clock?
Yeah. What happens at 11?
He's got his pocket watch. What happens?
And he's
10, 12, 11, 5. Turns around, immediately blows up the tail. Just destroys his own, the airplane that they're flying. It destroys the fucking tail. "Are we hit, Dad?" "I'm sorry, son. They got us." That's one of my favorite moments in that movie.
Oh my God.
He's such a, he's always right. He's always, but he's totally out of his element. He fucks up. It's like the floor is on fire. It's like he doesn't know how to do this. "Those people are trying to kill us." I know. It's a new experience for me. There's so many comedic little moments between those two.
Oh yeah, it reminds me of when you start to see like the character progression of Dr. Jones, and how towards the end of the movie you're getting, before they actually get into like the final temple, and like you think Indiana Jones has been blown up by a tank as he's saved everyone else, and you have this very like a good 15 seconds of just gut-wrenching emotion from a few cast members. Then Indy, of course, walks back up, walks right next to his dad. And like you finally, like, you see a moment where you think that he's going to soften and actually care more about Indy than finding the Grail, and you've got that for all of like 5 seconds, and then he quickly,
I thought I lost you.
I thought I lost you, and then releases him and keeps going. He's like, "Why would we stop now? It's right there," and he just is off. And then
keep going then.
Like the fedora falls back down, and he grabs it. Oh.
And the hat comes tumbling in, and he's just like, "Oh shit!"
Yeah, I guess the movie goes on. Here we go.
Yeah. It's a great scene. I love that scene. Then and see, Sean Connery is such a great actor that he can play the comedy of it, and then when he goes into his emotions and he shows love for his boy, we all felt that. We all felt that genuine. Yeah. That genuine hug, and that, that's what you don't really get in action movies, is that quality of acting and writing. But here we have that, and we have the explosions and the action.
Yeah,
so it's just great stuff.
Yeah, it's kind of got everything, and I think that's where we naturally come to a close for this movie. We've gone over some like the best moments without giving the plot away too much, so that way if you haven't seen this, you can watch it for the first time and love it the same way that we do. And this is where you normally talk about a film's legacy and what it still has as kind of like a staying power to itself. And this is one where it feels like it's got so much as far as what we still love about the movie and what it's done for modern cinema. So I'm just interested to hear from both of you, like, what do we think is probably one of the more timeless things about this movie, and how has that affected really movie making going forward from that point?
Go ahead.
I was going to say, Noah, you feel free.
No, you first.
It was a big essay question, Mark. You get this one first.
Well, I'm going to go, I'm going to go, I hope, a little bit different here. But for me, as I aged with this movie, as I kind of opened with, I focused on different things throughout the years. And one of the things that I really attached to as I became a older person, had kids, all that stuff, was that it dawned on me that some of the realizations I had from a teenager to a young adult is that there's a lot of things your parents do for you that you don't appreciate in the moment. You don't actually quite understand the lesson, and it just doesn't land. But then you start to think, I'm being challenged by the world, and I can handle this, and my parents aren't as useful as they might think they are. And in this movie, Indy kind of goes through a similar process where he's like, Dad, I got this. I got it figured out. Your uses aren't quite as big as maybe mine are. And as we kind of go through this movie, Sean Connery's character kind of proves that, hey, we're being met with these challenges, and each one of us is actually bringing something to the table. It may not be explicitly stated by Indy, but the only reason why they survive is because of each other. And because of these individual things that they do. So for me, seeing how this movie wraps up, and you've got Henry Jones reaching down for Junior and basically telling him, hey, it's going to be okay. We got this. We don't need that lifelong pursuit anymore. To me, that was like the ultimate parent moment, where your kid is like, wait a second, holy shit. The realization just hit me. And I had that growing up too, where I view my parents in an entirely different light now than I did 10 years ago. So it hits in the feels for me in a lot of different ways. But that's yeah, that's my take on it. Noah, what about you?
I think it has. Yeah, you're right. It has a lot to do with the relationship between the father and the son, and like you said, the things that you don't appreciate that your parents did for you, you learn to understand why they were doing that later on in life. Um, as far as like what it did for movies, cinema, for movies of the time, I think I feel like it was an alternative to that action movie that was happening, starting to take over. It it was something that was well produced, well directed, well acted, well written, and that's a tough thing to do with that type of genre. And so I think that and the legacy of the character itself, Indiana Jones, and the trilogy, and what that stood for, the music and the cinematography and the special effects were all top of the line, I believe, because we're using George Lucas's company to do special effects. The I think in Raiders it was the same group that did some of the Star Wars effects, and the ET, and a lot of movies at that time. There wasn't a lot of special effects houses that handled all that. So those guys that did the Star Wars, I believe, were doing more than just Star Wars. They were doing a lot of different movies of the time of that era, and um, the effects on the movie were great. So I think it was important for showing these trilogies, because that's what we get now. We have tons of trilogies nowadays.
Yeah.
That wasn't a thing really. I mean, unless it was like a horror movie, would have 5 or 7 of them. But these tight little trilogies like Star Wars and Indiana Jones, it was this complete package, and the music was very impactful as well. That sound, that score is ingrained in a lot of our pop culture in our heads. So it hit us in many different ways. And if you didn't like it, then, well, I don't know what the hell's wrong with you, because it was it's an incredible movie and a great ride. I'm not so happy with what's happening after it, with the movies that have come after. I don't know if we want. I don't want to go there necessarily, but just as far as Last Crusade, it was a big bar to set in that time period in terms of great acting, great story, great writing, great cinematography, great directing.
Yeah. And on that note, I'm pretty sure that Harrison Ford would also side with Christopher Reeve when he said that he made too many Superman movies. In that respect. So I think this has been a amazing conversation about an amazing movie. And I just want to say again, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate you taking your time and talking about this with us. Before you go, if you could give us just how do our in case our listeners have forgotten how to find you and keep up with you and everything you're doing, where's the best place to find you?
You can find me in
your house. That's weird. That's too much.
Yeah, Montana. No, I'm on Instagram, the Noah Watts. You can find Noah Watts on YouTube and on Facebook. I normally post all the stuff that that has to do with my music on my Facebook and Instagram page. That's pretty much where I'm at, and YouTube. So, I do have some links I could probably shoot over to you guys if you wanted to post them or whatever. But yeah, that's mostly where I am on social media.
And as always, we would like to thank the Dissection crew for doing what they do week in and week out. Your support really does go a long way in helping the podcast continue. And if you happen to stumble upon today's episode by accident, or maybe you just heard Noah Watts was back and wanted to come back and take a listen or a watch if you've got us on YouTube, if you could give us a like and a subscribe, or maybe even a review, it would continue to help us out so very much.
Hey, and we also love hearing from you, so feel free to message us over at digitaldissectionpodcast@gmail.com. We welcome your ideas for future shows, and honestly, any feedback you have from these episodes. But if you do want to discuss something, just make sure that it's tastefully done.
I'm Noah Watts, and until next time, keep on dissecting.